It almost seems crazy that it's now been over 30 years since Mortal Kombat from 1995 first hit the theaters, and I don't think many people expected it to be such a massive hit, given that a first-time director was in charge. It debuted strongly at the box office with $23 million on the opening weekend, and eventually went on to make a jaw-dropping $122 million worldwide. When people regard this as one of the best video game adaptations of all time, I completely agree. Such was the charm of this film. But the real story isn't just what made it to screen, it's everything that happened behind the camera. The lies, the injuries, the rockstar generosity, and the sheer audacity of people who had no idea what they were doing, yet somehow made something iconic. In this video, I'll cover 10 insane things about the production of the original Mortal Kombat film that reveal just how wild the whole thing really was. The director had exactly one movie to his name. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that when Paul W.S. Anderson was handed the keys to one of the hottest video game properties in the world, he had exactly one film on his resume. It was a micro-budget British crime film called Shopping that was practically unknown outside the UK. It starred a then-unknown Jude Law in his first major film role, alongside Sean Bean, Jonathan Pryce, Marianne Faithfull, and Sadie Frost. And let me tell you that this crackerjack cast was assembled for almost no money. Critics in England absolutely hated it, with one reviewer calling it nothing more than a reckless orgy of destruction. Anderson loved the insult so much, he put it on the poster. When American studio executives saw Shopping at Sundance, they saw a guy who could get enormous production value out of almost nothing. That quality made him the perfect candidate for Mortal Kombat, which was not a massive studio picture, but rather a New Line Cinema production, the independent house best known at the time for Freddy Krueger and the Ninja Turtles. Anderson straight up lied his way into the job. I already told you that Paul W.S. Anderson was a newbie, and he also had zero experience with visual effects when he got the job. Mortal Kombat was going to be his first big VFX movie, and the studio was understandably nervous. So what did he do to handle things better? He went to a bookstore, bought every single book he could find on visual effects, matte painting, CGI, and compositing, memorized the jargon, and walked into meetings with New Line's head of production, dropping terms like rotoscoping and matte painting with supreme confidence. He later admitted that he had absolutely no idea what most of those concepts actually entailed in practice, but he threw them out with enough conviction that they gave him the job anyway. It was fake it till you make it on a Hollywood scale, and it worked spectacularly. Even once filming began, Anderson had to learn on the fly. Robin Shou, who played Liu Kang and had extensive Hong Kong action film experience, had to pull Anderson aside during early fight scene shoots to explain the concept of coverage, which is that you don't shoot entire fights in one wide master take. There was no script, just a 20-page outline. When Anderson came aboard the project, there was no completed screenplay waiting for him. There was just a 20-page outline. The script was developed organically as pre-production progressed, which actually allowed Anderson to insert his own ideas for action sequences, locations, and character arcs. His chief creative thrust was always to push the movie closer to the feel of the actual video games, which he had spent hours playing in London arcades during his years trying to break into the film industry. I guess that's what makes the film so special, because a fan was directing the narrative. He saw the DNA of the games clearly, which was a martial arts tournament on a mysterious island populated by fantastical creatures, which he identified as essentially Enter the Dragon meeting Jason and the Argonauts, or The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. The screenwriter, Kevin Droney, was reportedly so unhappy with how much the actors changed his work through ad-libbing and rewrites that he ran into Lyndon Ashby, Johnny Cage, at a Christmas party after the film's release and introduced him to his date as the asshole that ruined my script. Goro was a $1 million puppet operated by up to 16 people. Goro, the fearsome four-armed Shokan prince and one of the film's most iconic visuals, was not a CGI creation, but a massive practical puppet that cost $1 million to build. At up to 8 feet tall and weighing around 250 pounds, the animatronic beast required between 13 and 16 puppeteers working simultaneously to bring him to life. One person operated the eyeballs, another handled the eyebrows, and others controlled the forearms, the torso, the facial expressions. It was an extraordinary mechanical feat for 1995. The production designer, Jonathan Carlson, had originally designed beautiful koi ponds and reflection pools for the statuary garden where Goro appeared. But the team was terrified that Goro might topple over into the water, short-circuit the electronics, and destroy the million-dollar puppet. So the water was scrapped entirely. When the 2021 Mortal Kombat reboot featured a CGI Goro, the internet collectively and loudly preferred the old puppet version. And I can totally see why.
Do you need help with those?
The iconic temple set was built in an airport hangar. The breathtaking statuary garden set those enormous ancient pillars, stone warriors, and mythological decor that gave the film so much of its visual identity. But what might be amusing for you is that it was not built on a proper Hollywood soundstage. The production couldn't afford it, so instead, the entire set was constructed inside an airplane hangar. Since it was an active airport facility, every single dialogue scene had to be filmed in between airplane landings. The production had a crew member stationed outside with a pair of binoculars watching the runway. When a flight was incoming, the signal went out, actors had to wrap up mid-scene, and everyone waited for the noise to pass before rolling cameras again. The actors were constantly rushed, and the sound crew regularly captured ruined takes because of a 747 deciding to land at exactly the wrong moment. It's objectively one of the most chaotic shooting conditions imaginable for a major studio release. Christopher Lambert came to Thailand for free and paid for the wrap party. Christopher Lambert, the European megastar who played Thunder God Raiden, was brought onto the film for a very limited contract, which was approximately $1 million for around 2 to 3 weeks of work. When it was time for the Thailand location shoot, he was contractually not obligated to be there. Anderson had developed a workaround similar to what had been done with Sean Connery in the original Highlander, shooting a double in the locations and doing Lambert's close-ups back in a studio. But Lambert refused and told Anderson directly that he had seen it done in Highlander and that times had changed. The audiences would now take notice, and it would compromise the film. So Lambert came to Thailand on his own dime, entirely for free, giving the film wide shots, medium shots, and real landscape integration that would have been impossible otherwise. And then, because apparently the man is a saint, he paid for the entire cast and crew wrap party out of his own pocket too. If only we all had a Christopher Lambert in our lives.
Yeah, study this!
Cameron Diaz was cast as Sonya Blade. I love how casting choices are often so random, and yet they go on to become major talking points decades after the movie releases. Before Bridget Wilson stepped into the role, the producers had already cast someone else entirely as Sonya Blade. This was a completely unknown young actress they had spotted in dailies from an upcoming New Line film called The Mask, and the actress was none other than Cameron Diaz. The producers were so blown away by what they saw of her in those early Mask dailies that they cast her immediately, even putting her through martial arts training. Then, just before filming began, Diaz broke her wrist, and it was bad enough that she could not perform the physical demands the role required. She was replaced by Bridget Wilson, who went on to perform all of her own stunts, including partially dislocating her shoulder early in production and continuing to shoot anyway. Meanwhile, the role of Johnny Cage had its own casting chaos. Jean-Claude Van Damme had turned it down to do Street Fighter instead. And as we all know, it all worked out for the best, didn't it?
You really are Raiden.
Come with me.
Sean Connery was approached to play Raiden. Here goes another interesting casting story from the film. Before Christopher Lambert was cast as the Thunder God Raiden, the production had actually inquired about securing Sir Sean Connery for the role. Connery was, at that point, one of the biggest names in Hollywood and a genuine global superstar. According to the film's associate producer, Laurie Appelian, they reached out but were told Connery was largely uninterested in taking on physical roles at the time. It's a staggering what if for film history. Lambert, of course, brought something uniquely perfect to the role, and I believe that his European gravitas and otherworldly screen presence fit Raiden in ways that are now impossible to imagine differently. The actors were genuinely getting destroyed on set. The fight scenes in Mortal Kombat look spectacular, but they came at a real physical cost to the cast. Robin Shou, who played Liu Kang, developed an internal rating system for the fights based on how many ribs he bruised during filming. The reptile fight was rated a 3, with 3 bruised ribs. More dramatically, during production of that same reptile sequence, Shou actually fractured 2 ribs when he was thrown into a pillar on his 10th take. He said nothing and quietly told his opponent Keith Cook not to kick him on his right side and muscled through the rest of the fight before going to the hospital afterwards. His reasoning was that if he told anyone, they'd stop production, and he didn't want to jeopardize his Hollywood shot. Lyndon Ashby fared no better, and he was eating Advil like candy throughout the shoot and suffered a bruised kidney when Scorpion actor Chris Casamassa delivered an axe kick that slipped between his protective pads. I don't think many modern-day actors can match this level of commitment and sacrifice for the sake of a movie. The soundtrack was rejected by major labels, then became the first platinum EDM album in history. Many fans have grown up loving the iconic Mortal Kombat soundtrack. But perhaps the most insane production story of all involves the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, which featured the now legendary Techno Syndrome along with a collection of high-energy electronic dance music. The producers were absolutely convinced that this was the right sound for the film, but the music industry disagreed violently. When they pitched the EDM soundtrack concept to Sony, the label countered by suggesting they use Buckethead in a guitar duel with Eddie Van Halen. The producers walked out, and they then went to Virgin Records, who countered with Janet Jackson, leading to another walkout. Nobody wanted to put their name on an electronic dance music soundtrack for an action movie because, at the time, techno was viewed in America as niche European club music that simply wouldn't sell. They ended up going with TVT, a small independent label, and the result became the first platinum EDM soundtrack album in music history. The album sold so well that TVT released a sequel album called More Mortal Kombat, consisting entirely of tracks that hadn't even made it into the film, simply because the demand for more product was so high. Anderson received a platinum disc for The Wall, but, as he cheerfully noted, 0 residuals. What makes the original Mortal Kombat such an enduring piece of cinema isn't just the nostalgia or the fighting, or even that unforgettable theme. I think the real magic is that the entire film was built on improvisation, audacity, and people doing things they were told couldn't or shouldn't be done. The fact that it turned out as good as it did is genuinely miraculous, and I hope the upcoming Mortal Kombat 2 brings back the glory days of the franchise with more resemblance to the source material. I'd love to hear your take on some of these crazy facts about the movie that I've discussed in this video. And also, share your views on the upcoming film. If you appreciate the efforts to bring you this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more such videos.